Welcome back to the Dopesick Show you won't get sick of. I'm Spencer and this is Sasha. I spent most of my 20s in federal prison, but I've been off heroin since April 9, 2010. Got a lot of stories about the stupid stuff I did to get put in prison. I've also got quite a few about the crazy stuff that happened when I was actually in prison. And God forbid you end up in prison, you want to make some of the same mistakes I made. So this is kind of a crazy one, just something reminded me of it today. But, you know, in prison, you have certain people that people call too hard for the yard. And now they're corny people. They just get laughed at when they do it. But there are certain people that have a certain look, maybe a certain bit about a muscle to them, to where they do it and just people don't say anything. They just deal with it. And we all had to deal with idiots like that, okay? And some people don't deal with them. Some people comment. But most of the time, you know, they're considered, you know, good among their crew and everything else. Now, a lot of the time when people do that, not all the time, a good bit of the time, it's to compensate, it's to hide something. In particular, you know, there was a white fella from my area. His name was Ralph. He went by Boss, which is really hilarious because I know where he was hustling a bit because I was tied in with the same people he was tied in with, and he actually told on those people. But anyway, there were these kids that sold rock out there, and they called people that, you know, they called like middle-aged crackheads and stuff boss. It meant big old sack of you know what. And I guess he thought, ha, I'm a boss. But anyway, he was middleman in a good, decent bit for this guy who was, you know, the man. And he was one of those people, you know, who acted too hard for the yard, but he set them up, undercover by, and then he was stupid enough to wait till that night when he thought the DEA wasn't watching anymore. Go back to that place and buy some more, so they took his deal away. I'll talk a whole lot about it later. I'll get everything mapped out on that. But he was one of those people. Too hard for the yard and everything else. You know, he noticed that I recognized him when he first got there. So he went around saying stuff about me. And, you know, I didn't hang with the white crew with the Swazis and all that tattooed on them because back then my hussy ex, who I was with, was black. And, you know, so what I look like hanging out with some people with some, you know, some like Nazi stuff tattooed. I mean, that didn't fit well with me. But anyway, so it was to compensate for that. Just like this fella. Now, there's this fella in the building. Now, he was a black dude. Now, I'm going to tell you something. When it comes to people hiding, there's certain cultural differences that makes it easier for one culture to hide as opposed to another. You get these middle-aged white men, that professionals and everything, they're easy to spot. They can't pretend to be anything else. Now, listening to rap music, you know, culturally, I mean, that's more a black thing than a white thing. You know, my dad isn't sitting around listening to Gucci Mane. Let's be real about it, okay? But a lot of black people are, okay? So the white people were easy to spot because of that. Now, the black people, there were some of them in there that listened to things like Gucci Mane, and you couldn't spot them because of it. Just a cultural difference. This guy was going around claiming he's a dealer, this, and that, too hard for the yard stuff. And I don't know if it was somebody who got suspicious or what exactly triggered it. But a lot of the time, sooner or later, somebody's going to do a little bit of deep diving. And they did a little bit of deep diving, and they found out he was a chomo. So, these people were pissed. He's doing all this preaching. First off, they were subjected to that, and they had to deal with that. They had to deal with that, yeah, all that, you know, talking about prisons and politics, too hard for the yard, this, and that. And turns out, he's a chomo all along, okay? First off, he messed with kids. Nobody likes that. Second off, the other stuff he did, man, that's annoying. And these people took really personal offense to it. Now, a lot of the time, people go under eventually it almost always came out as somebody who was a chomo. But what they did was they ended up going to get copy cards. See, they have copy cards you can buy at commissary. I believe they cost $5.50. And you can get 50 copies on the copy machine, which is an education for that. Well, they made more copies with his face, with his picture, and said, I lied to my friend, said I sold drugs, when in reality I messed with kids. And they made these copies and they put them freaking everywhere. You saw these copies. Now, of course, in the unit, they got monitored cameras a little more, somebody's counselor and everything else. outside on the rec yard. They taped them to the bleachers. There's a bathroom that's in the middle of the rec yard. They can't look at your junk when you're taking a leak. So the bathroom was like this build is like the wall. There's a hill where there's a cop car that sits up on the hill that looks down. There's a full wall. They can't see anything. There's a full wall there. There's a full wall here. Full roof over top. And then on the opposite side, it came up about 4 or 5 foot tall, and came across. So if the staff was walking there, they could see from there up. People would hunker down behind it and smoke, drink, whatever, do drugs. And on the other end, it was open though. So if a car drive by, they could see that. They taped them all up, all over there. Like they had a couple of them that were on the dang ceiling. I don't even know how they got them up there. I mean, they had like this table thing in there that didn't make sense. They had to have stood on there and just smacked it up. But they were putting these things everywhere. I went and, I had to work in the kitchen for 90 days against my will. If you get put in the kitchen, they make you stay in there 90 days. So you have a job before that. There was a thing. I had a no-pay job at rec. Ended up having to work in the kitchen. The bathrooms in the kitchen, there were 2 different bathrooms. Both bathrooms had them plastered. Again, on the dang ceiling. They were on the ceiling too. Not just a couple copies, a lot of copies. And, the kitchen people made it, like the kitchen staff there. One of them made an announcement about, we can't be having y'all do this, blah, 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 this and that. But these things were everywhere. And this guy went from basically having his little bit of status that he thought he had to being ridiculed and outcast overnight. In my personal opinion, that's how it should be. I mean, shoot. Especially when he was pretending he was something he wasn't. People who make friends with these people that lie about who they were in terms of something that is the most despicable, awful thing that somebody can do, that you become friends with them for a good bit and then you find out about that, it messes you up for life. It happened with me to the point where, there's anybody that's middle-aged, white with really thick glasses and they speak a little too proper, they're probably just a dorky white dude. But like, to me, I get to thinking, you mess with kids, been a couple times out in public. My stepdaughter, I've went off on people a little bit. I felt like some weird, funky stuff was going on, and I went a little bit wild on it, And so he got what he deserved ultimately, but it was crazy because there were so many people that got exposed for being that, but these people who were friends with him, really, they took it to another level. Like, usually they ridicule the words out and everything else, but they make copies with his face and they put it everywhere. These copies would fall off the thing and they'd be flying across the yard. Like, you already knew what it was when you saw a piece of paper flying across the yard. They must have put these copies, $5. I'd say over time they must spend $100 on these copies. 50 copies a thing. So I'd say they must have made 1,000 copies in total. It felt like forever that you were seeing them. And this dude was, you didn't see him out in the yard anymore. I'm sure he pretty much just ate and went to his cell. And, that's what he gets. But in a place where it's a whole bunch of people like that, you wish it'd happen more frequently. But, those too hard for the yard people. There was a too hard for the yard person out of the white people, okay, that was in, just, it wasn't like, I wouldn't call it the woods, but they call it the haters, like this group. Now, this guy ended up having to go back to court. Well, he didn't have to go back. He went back to court and he testified on a murder. He came back. It was known. Somehow it got put out there on him. And he was one of those too hard for the yard people. Oh, man. Just what happened overnight, his whole attitude and changed. But it was weird. Now, he wasn't a chomo, but he testified on a murder to get a reduction, from my understanding. That's what the word was anyway. He still came out in the yard a bit, but just how he interacted with people, it was like he started acting, funny as it sounds, I want to say normal. Like, oh, too hard for the yard, and like he's going to whoop somebody and this and that. It's like he started acting like a normal person after that, how you'd see him talking to people. Like his whole scale and all that went away. But I mean, I guess that Too Hard for the Yard stuff wasn't going to work after that got put out there. But anyway, it's something that happened a number of times. But all those copies, all that, those people who he was friends with, it must have really, really hit hard. Because they put some money into this. They put some money into this to copy all those and put them everywhere. They put them on places that if he was up there trying to get them off, people probably would have came over and, you know, just made fun of him relentlessly. So anyway, that's just another little second one I figured I'd throw up here today. If you liked the video, press the like button. If not, 10 minutes, 40 seconds of your life, which you'll never get back. Hope you did, though.